Hello there everyone, my name is Kirsten. This is going to be a serious chat with myself being back at home for the first time in about 20 years. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started into this very serious topic. So as the same concept applies with every single story, I thought I would talk from the beginning. So as some of you may or may not have known, I was born in a place called Fort Wayne, Indiana. From there, I basically lived in Indiana all the way up until I was in elementary school when I ended up moving and switching to a different state. So by the time I turned 9 years old, my family and we basically moved into California. And there were various reasons on why my folks and I decided to move to California to begin with. And one of the main reasons being was that my grandfather ended up retiring and he figured he would want to live there to have a better life and whatnot. And unfortunately for this part, I can't get into any sort of graphic details about like my personal life growing up in Indiana, but to make it like the long story short version, my mother was very heavy into drugs, and my father did a lot of bad to the point where he ended up going to prison. And so with all this drama that was going on between my mom and my dad and my family at the time, there was a lot of struggles that I went through during elementary school. Some of you guys also may not know this about me, and this is something I thought about talking in a separate video because that's a whole different ball game altogether and deserves a separate video. But to basically sum up like personal struggles that was going on with me when I was growing up, besides my parents obviously that were like completely irresponsible with how they both handled my brother and myself included. And I was eventually diagnosed with autism. I fall under the Asperger's syndrome, but when I was growing up as a kid, my autism was very severe, and it was to a point where I couldn't interact with the kids right, and I preferred being alone and not interacting with as many people. And I was pretty much made fun of a lot as a kid and all that other type of thing. But again, that is something that deserves to be told in a completely separate story. But yeah, long story short, I was severely autistic during that time, and you know, the drama that was going on with my parents, my family, and so on. So my brother, my uncle, my grandparents and we moved to California by the time I turned 9 years old. So that's basically the gist of when I ended up leaving Indiana. Now, when I lived in California, I lived in a place called Morgan Hill. That was basically like the first area in California I ended up living in. And then from there we moved to various different places from there. And I basically lived in California from the time I was in my elementary school years all the way up until I graduated from college. So I lived in California for quite some time, damn near two decades. I lived in California for 18 years. Too much, far too long years, but ever since I left home, I always felt like I was completely out of place with like the people that lived there, and I felt that way for a very long time, and I missed home so much, and I basically missed my family back in Indiana, especially like my other grandparents during that time. And during all that time that I was away from home, I basically could only visit my other grandparents from Indiana during that time. Usually just every year during summer, because that was basically the only time I had off to go visit them and everything else like that. So I basically made a whole different separate video on why I ended up leaving California to begin with. I'll be sure to list it in the description box down below, or I'll put it in the cards somewhere. One of these corners, I guess. But that's a whole completely different story, all in an end of itself. So I don't want to repeat myself and just explain too much on, you know, reasons why I ended up leaving, but long story short, it just became way too expensive to live, and that was basically the reason why we ended up moving altogether. When I first moved into California, especially with myself growing up with autism, there was definitely quite a lot of struggles that I of course was going through, obviously. And the elementary school that I was associated with back in the past, their education system completely sucked, and it was to a point where I had to go to summer school because, you know, I was just not, you know, catching up on anything or anything like that. So I would say during my time in California, I feel like my education did get a lot more better. But in my honest opinion, I felt like where I got like the greatest education the most was when I went to college, because during my times in elementary school all the way up until high school, I felt like I did not learn jack shit. And I didn't learn anything until I went to college and graduated with my AA degree. So I ended up graduating from my local community college with an A in studio arts, which was quite a big, huge, amazing accomplishment. Probably one of the best achievements I've ever done with my life so far. And I plan to, you know, do things that'll make me feel more successful in the future. And I know that when people think of the word successful, people usually mean that, you know, they want to achieve like lots of money. But for myself personally, I feel like success to me would be a feeling of accomplishment, feeling like you achieved something that you've worked so hard to put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, you know what I mean? So yeah, off topic already, but yeah, I just felt really proud with all the amazing accomplishments I've done, and I just feel very grateful for all the things that I've done in my life and the people that I've met along the way. So that's the only thing I can say about my experience. But there were times where I struggled so severely, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, looking back on all the good things that I've done, I do feel like I did a lot looking back on what I did previously. So Now that I've pretty much explained little bits and pieces of like what my life has been like living in California, and now I'm gonna go ahead and briefly talk about like my whole expand of a couple of years living in Texas. We basically left California because of how crazy expensive it was getting, but also my aunt got accepted as a job opportunity down in Texas, and my folks suddenly decided to follow them along and live in Texas with them. And I gotta say, my time living in Texas, it was quite interesting. I'm not gonna lie, it was very interesting. I probably could have made a separate video on reasons why I decided to leave Texas, but I feel like that deserves a whole separate video all on its own. But to summarize like my brief moment living in Texas, the thing I absolutely hated the most living down in Texas, and especially the Houston area, it was fucking hot. I'm not even joking. It was so hot outside that I could not go outside and enjoy myself, basically. I could not go outside to enjoy myself, and because I lived in Houston, the crime area was pretty bad. And I think Houston is also known for like its sex trafficking, so that was basically another reason why I didn't really like it down there too much. I was afraid to go out and do anything, go anywhere by myself without having a family member come with me, or at least having my dog Jasmine to come alongside me when I take her out for walks or something, just little things like that. During my time living in Texas, I feel like I didn't really do much, to be honest. I mean, there was an incident where I was supposed to go back to school, but the college or university that I was supposed to transfer into, it was way too expensive for me to participate in a place like that over there. So basically I decided not to go. But I would say during my time in Texas, I had like this moment of realization that I wanted to do something creative with my life. There was so much creativity that I had to get out there in the world. I just didn't know how to do them. And then I had a light bulb moment where I'm all like, you know what? I should become an actress, because I feel like I could just become anybody and I could accomplish so many things as an actor. So I had a moment where I was all like, hey, acting it is. So I didn't go back to college, but I was taking a few acting classes in particular. So I ended up going to a local theater where they had acting classes available, and I would say that definitely helped me out in so many different ways. But the place I really do want to give the most credit to, and something I feel like I've learned a lot from, was when I went to the acting classes in Houston. I felt like I learned so much from my own instructor, and I actually got to meet really good friends in that acting class altogether, which is so fantastic. And one thing I will give credit for living in a place like Texas is that the people are so friendly and they are genuinely so nice. And I am not even kidding you. You could meet like a perfect stranger and automatically they could become like a really good friends of yours. And I feel like that's what I did with my acting classes during that time in Houston. And that's how I felt when I was taking acting classes down in Houston during that time. And till this very day, I still kind of talk to them off and on here a little bit, and I always check up on them on Instagram to see how they're doing and everything else like that. And yeah, it was just a really amazing experience that I got to take acting classes there in Houston at the very least. And I can't thank anybody enough for all the help that they've put me through, and what incredible, awesome people that I got to meet in one hand. But the reality is that we just didn't like the state altogether. So now that we got to leave Texas after like 2 years, 2 whole years, I'm not even kidding you, I end up moving back to Indiana from there. So now that that's out of the way, I thought I would go ahead and conclude my initial thoughts and plans and just present day generally on how I feel just being back home after 20 years of being away from home. Fast forward from the time I was 9 years old, living in California, then Texas, and back at home again. I just gotta say, I did not expect to come home this soon. There's a part of me that really wanted to return home. It's just, I know that I couldn't be able to leave because of what I was going through with my family during that time. And now that my folks actually decided to return back home into Indiana, I feel like, I don't know how to describe this feeling to you guys, but in a way I feel like this is a place where I totally belong and that I feel like I'm safe at home already. Maybe it was the fact that I end up growing up here as a child, but there was always a place in my heart that did feel like home. And you know what they say, home is where the heart is. And it's funny, I left Indiana at 9 years old, and returning home all of a sudden, I came back home at the age of 29. So my goodness, I mean, 20 years of being away, that is a long time being away from home. And I gotta say, I'm really happy to be home, to be honest. The only downside is that I live in a very small town, to the point where I feel like I can't do anything creative with like acting in general, but I plan to work on that sometime soon as this whole quarantine situation gets lifted. But I do plan to get things all figured out, especially now that I'm finally back at home. I can go back to college again for the first time in about like 3 years, because I graduated back in 2017. And now that I'm officially back home, I can finally work on other projects that I wanted to do. And also the fact that I wanted to focus on other projects that I've really wanted to achieve in my lifetime. And I feel like I can finally be able to do that now that I'm back at home. So it feels really amazing to be back at home, and I just couldn't be more glad to experience some of the things that has happened in my life, and just many things really. So I feel like I'm rambling at this point, so you guys get the gist. 20 years being away from home, finally back at home. I am really happy. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say really. So that is pretty much everything that I thought I would share with you guys on my experience being away from home for about 20 years and now finally officially returning home. So I hope you guys enjoyed what I had to share in this video altogether. So if you did, be sure to sucker punch that like button down below. Comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on anything. Hopefully we can get a conversation going. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please do dedicate the time and effort to subscribe to my lovely channel. Join my little army of darkness. And if you hit that bell notification icon, you will be notified whenever I upload a brand new video. These littlest things would really mean a lot to me. If you guys are interested in following me outside of YouTube, all of my social medias will be listed in the description box right down below if you are indeed interested in checking them out yourself and such. If you guys are interested in gaming related content, my second channel dedicated to gaming is listed in the description box right down below as well. And if you guys want to participate in my live streams sometime in the future, my Twitch is also listed in the description box down below. So please go check them out. And of course, now that that's all said and done, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a completely chill week, an awesome day or night, and I will talk to you all soon in the very next video. So until then, stay completely dark and so fucking brutal and awesome, my friends. Take care and goodbye for now. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.